The billionaire arrived at the airport with a sense of purpose. Every detail of the trip had been carefully planned, down to the precise time he would land and the car that would pick him up. He was used to handling large deals and making quick decisions, but today felt different. There was a strange nervousness in his chest that he couldn't shake. He had flown halfway across the world to finalize a business deal worth millions, and everything depended on clear communication. Yet, he didn't know the language of the country he was visiting. That wasn't normally a problem, because his translator was supposed to be with him, ready to assist. But a sudden call from his assistant had told him the translator would be delayed. The message had been short, almost too short. Translator stuck. Will arrive later. That little sentence sent a wave of panic through him. He stepped out of the airport and felt the warm, foreign air brush against his face. The streets were busy with people speaking rapidly in a language that sounded like music he couldn't understand. Cars honked, vendors shouted, and there was a constant motion that made him feel slightly out of place. Normally, he thrived in high-pressure environments, but now he felt exposed. He needed his translator more than ever. His driver had been waiting at the airport and helped him into a sleek black car. As they drove toward the hotel, he tried to review the documents on his tablet, but the unfamiliar street signs and chaotic traffic distracted him. Each time he looked up, he felt a pang of worry that he might be missing something important. His mind raced through every possible scenario. What if the meeting didn't go well? What if the other party misunderstood him? What if he lost the deal entirely? It was a lot to carry at once. Upon reaching the hotel, he was greeted with a grand lobby filled with shining marble floors, sparkling chandeliers, and staff bowing politely. The hotel was luxurious, but nothing about it made him feel calm. In fact, the opulence only reminded him of the stakes. He had invested so much time, energy, and money into this deal, and now a simple delay could threaten everything. He checked into his room, but he couldn't settle down. He paced, picked up the phone, and tried calling his assistant again. No new updates. The translator was still delayed. He went over the plan in his mind. The meeting was set to take place in the hotel's conference room, a space that was as impressive as the rest of the building. Glass walls looked out over the city, and a large table sat in the middle, surrounded by high-backed chairs. The other party would be arriving any minute, and he would need to present, negotiate, and make decisions without any help. The thought made his heart race. He had handled tough negotiations before, but he had always relied on his translator to bridge the gap. Without that, he was vulnerable. He decided to rehearse his points aloud, speaking slowly and clearly, hoping that he might be able to convey some meaning through gestures and intonation alone. Felt awkward and strained. Every sentence seemed insufficient, every word possibly misunderstood. He paused, realizing that all his preparation could fall apart simply because of a missing person. It was a reminder that in business, even the smallest detail could make a huge difference. As he paced, he glanced out the window. The city below was alive, with people going about their day, unaware of the high-stakes drama unfolding above them. He felt a strange mixture of insignificance and pressure. On one hand, this was just another city filled with strangers. On the other, the next few hours would define millions of dollars of work. His mind tried to focus, but anxiety crept in like a shadow. He was aware of every tick of the clock. Finally, he made his way down to the conference room. The staff led him through polished hallways and opened the doors to reveal the room where the deal would happen. It was elegant, with leather chairs, polished wood, and screens ready for presentations. Yet, as he looked around, he realized that the other party was already there, speaking animatedly in the local language. They had expected him and were clearly prepared. His absence of understanding felt even more pronounced. He took a deep breath and tried to calm himself, but his hands trembled slightly as he set down his documents. He tried to greet the other side with a smile and a nod, hoping that his body language would communicate confidence. They smiled back, but he noticed subtle glances, questions exchanged, and he felt the gap widen between them. His thoughts raced. How could he explain the value of his proposal? How could he negotiate terms? How could he make sure they trusted him without understanding a single word? The pressure was immense, and he felt a lump in his throat. Minutes felt like hours. He tried to speak, gesturing with his hands, pointing at charts and graphs, but it was clear that communication was failing. The other party looked puzzled, and his frustration grew. He had always prided himself on being able to control situations, but this was a situation entirely out of his control. His usual confidence was replaced by panic, a feeling he rarely allowed himself to experience. Every failed attempt at communication increased his worry that the deal could collapse in front of him. He noticed a waitress coming in to serve water and coffee. She moved gracefully, balancing trays and speaking softly to the staff. Something about her presence gave him a small spark of hope, even if he couldn't explain why. He focused on the water she brought, thanking her politely, and then stepped back to take another breath. He knew he had to keep trying, but he felt the weight of every decision pressing down on him. As he reviewed his notes, he realized that this moment was a test, not just of business skill but of patience and adaptability. He had never been in a situation where he was so dependent on someone else for communication, and it humbled him. He understood now that even the most prepared person could be caught off guard. Every detail mattered, every second counted, and he had to find a solution quickly. He watched the other party speak, trying to pick up on gestures, tone, and inflection. Even without understanding the words, he could sense the direction of their discussion and the points they cared about most. He noted their enthusiasm, the way they leaned forward, and the pauses they took. It gave him clues, small but useful, on how to steer the conversation once he found a way to communicate effectively. Time kept moving, and the tension in the room was palpable. The billionaire felt a mixture of fear, urgency, and anticipation. He was desperate for someone to help bridge the gap. He knew that the success of this meeting could change the course of his business and bring significant opportunities. The thought of losing it all due to a simple delay was unbearable. Every muscle in his body was tense, every thought consumed with the need to connect, to explain, to negotiate. As he prepared himself for yet another attempt at speaking, he noticed the waitress again, observing quietly from the corner. She seemed to sense the tension, moving calmly, her presence a quiet contrast to the chaos. The billionaire felt a glimmer of hope, an almost instinctive feeling that help might arrive in an unexpected form. He straightened his posture, took a deep breath, and prepared to face the situation, knowing that the next moments could define everything he had worked for. He realized that the story of this deal wasn't just about money or contracts, but about human connection, about bridging gaps when it mattered most, and about finding solutions in unexpected places. The minutes passed slowly, each one heavier than the last. The billionaire felt a knot in his stomach tighten with every failed attempt at communication. He had tried gestures, pointing at charts, and speaking slowly, but none of it seemed to make sense to the other party. Their faces showed polite confusion, and some of them exchanged quiet words in their own language. He knew that the meeting could fail if this continued. He had traveled so far, invested so much, and now a simple delay in translation threatened to undo all of it. His frustration began to grow. He felt the panic rising, a sensation he had rarely experienced before. Usually, he could control a room, direct the conversation, and make decisions confidently. But now he was powerless. Every idea he tried to communicate fell flat. He could feel the weight of the millions at stake pressing down on him, reminding him that this was not just another meeting. This was a defining moment, and the absence of his translator made it feel like he was standing in the middle of a storm without an umbrella. He tried to calm himself, taking deep breaths and focusing on what he could control. He reviewed his notes again, silently rehearsing the points he wanted to make. He thought about each slide in his presentation, the numbers, the projections, the benefits, and how he could explain them without words. It was a challenge unlike any he had faced before, a test of creativity and resilience. The other party continued speaking, their tone polite but curious. They leaned forward, occasionally nodding and gesturing towards him. He could sense that they wanted to engage, but the gap in communication created an invisible barrier. He tried to smile and maintain eye contact, hoping that some of his confidence would shine through despite the language barrier. Still, the tension in the room was palpable, and he felt every second tick by like a drumbeat echoing in his head. The billionaire began to feel a mix of emotions: frustration, anxiety, and a growing sense of desperation. He had spent years building his reputation, negotiating complex deals, and navigating difficult situations. He knew how to read people, how to understand their concerns, and how to present solutions. Yet here, all his experience seemed to falter. He realized that no amount of money or influence could replace the simple need for someone to translate, someone to bridge the gap between him and the other side. As he tried again to speak, his voice came out stiff and unnatural, filled with the tension he felt. He pointed at a chart, then at the other party, trying to convey numbers and concepts through gestures alone. The other side tilted their heads, trying to interpret his actions, but the meaning was lost in translation. The room grew quiet for a moment, as if everyone was waiting for a breakthrough that hadn't arrived yet. He felt the weight of the silence, heavy and oppressive. He looked around the room, searching for anything that could help. That's when he noticed the waitress again, moving calmly at the edge of the room, carrying a tray of drinks. She didn't speak to anyone at that moment, but her presence seemed steady, grounded. Something about her movement, her quiet confidence, gave him a small flicker of hope. He watched her place the drinks on a side table, her hands steady, her expression calm. It was a strange thing to focus on in the middle of a crisis, but he felt that help might come in an unexpected form. The billionaire tried to think strategically. If he couldn't communicate with words, he had to find another way. He considered writing notes, drawing diagrams, even using his phone to show images, but each idea felt slow and cumbersome. Time was slipping away, and with every passing moment, the risk of losing the deal grew. He felt the pressure of every investor, every team member, every decision he had ever made, converging in this one moment. It was both thrilling and terrifying. He glanced at the documents in front of him, reviewing projections, contract clauses, and key figures. His mind raced to match each point with a gesture or facial expression, hoping that someone might understand. But each attempt only highlighted how reliant he had become on his translator. He realized that human connection was more than just numbers and charts. It was words, tone, and the subtle nuances that only a translator could convey. Without that bridge, he felt isolated, almost naked in front of the other party. Panic threatened to overwhelm him, but he forced himself to step back and breathe. He reminded himself that losing composure would only make the situation worse. He needed clarity, focus, and patience, even if it felt impossible. He tried to slow his thoughts to prioritize what was most important. He could not control the language barrier, but he could control his own demeanor, his own body language, and his persistence. The other party continued their discussion, and he began to notice subtle cues. A nod here, a pause there, a raised eyebrow, little signs that indicated interest or hesitation. He realized that even without understanding the words, he could still read people, interpret their intentions, and respond in ways that might keep the conversation moving. It was a small victory, a reminder that communication was more than just language. He took a moment to observe the room. The polished wood table reflected the overhead lights. The leather chairs sat empty or filled with attentive listeners, and the screens displayed charts and graphs. The setting was impressive, but it only emphasized the challenge he faced. He thought about all the meetings he had led, all the negotiations he had managed, and realized that this was unlike anything he had encountered before. It required more than skill. It required adaptability, creativity, and perhaps a bit of luck. As he considered his next move, he noticed that the waitress had paused near the corner, watching the proceedings with quiet attention. Her eyes met his for a brief moment, and something clicked. He sensed that she might be able to help, that her presence was not accidental. He debated whether to ask, unsure if it would be appropriate. But the situation had reached a point where he had no choice. The deal, the millions, the opportunity, all depended on finding a way to communicate effectively. He decided to take the risk. He gestured toward her, indicating that he needed assistance. She approached cautiously, but with a calm confidence that immediately reassured him. He explained, as best he could, the problem. His translator was delayed, the meeting was critical, and he needed someone to bridge the language gap. She nodded, listening intently, and then gave a slight smile, as if to say she could manage. The billionaire felt a wave of relief. It was a small thing, a simple human connection, but it changed the energy in the room. He could feel the tension ease slightly, replaced by cautious hope. The other party continued speaking, unaware that an unexpected ally had just stepped forward to help. He watched as the waitress moved between him and the other side, ready to translate, ready to facilitate, ready to save the deal. For the first time since the meeting began, he allowed himself to breathe fully. The panic that had gripped him began to loosen, replaced by determination and focus. He realized that even in high-pressure situations, solutions could come from the most unexpected places. The meeting was still challenging, but now he had a chance. A chance to turn the situation around, to communicate clearly, and to secure the deal that had seemed so precarious just moments before. He straightened his posture, set aside his frustration, and prepared to speak again, this time with the quiet support of the waitress at his side. The stakes were still high, the pressure still immense, but he felt a renewed sense of possibility. He understood that this was more than a business deal. It was a lesson in patience, resilience, and the unexpected ways humans could support each other. The next few moments would be critical, and he was ready to face them, knowing that even in the most stressful situations, help could arrive when least expected. The waitress moved closer to the billionaire, her steps calm and measured. She didn't speak much at first, only nodded slightly as she observed the other party. The billionaire felt a strange mix of relief and curiosity. Could this person really help him negotiate millions of dollars? He had never imagined a situation like this. Usually, negotiations were handled with carefully trained assistants, professional translators, and strict protocols. But now, his hope rested on someone he had barely noticed before. He tried to explain the essentials of the deal, speaking slowly and pointing to charts, hoping she could understand enough to convey the message. She listened carefully, her eyes attentive, and then repeated the key points back to him in the other language. The sound was clear and precise, and the billionaire realized she had an excellent command of both languages. His heart lifted slightly as he saw her skill and focus. This was not just a helpful gesture. It was competence, efficiency, and quick thinking in action. As she began translating between him and the other party, the atmosphere in the room started to change. The tension that had been heavy only moments ago began to lighten. The other side's expressions softened, confusion giving way to understanding. They listened attentively, responding with questions, which she then conveyed accurately to the billionaire. His panic gradually receded, replaced by a growing confidence. Finally, he could communicate. Finally, he could be understood. The billionaire marveled at her ability to switch languages quickly, her voice calm and professional, even under the high pressure of the situation. Every word she translated seemed to smooth out the conversation. The charts, numbers, and proposals that had been lost in translation before were now clear. The other party's responses were accurate, and he could finally address their concerns and clarify points that were previously misunderstood. It was like a heavy fog lifting, revealing a clear path forward. He tried to maintain his composure, but he couldn't help a small smile. This was an unexpected turn. He had been on the verge of disaster, and now, thanks to her, the meeting was back on track. He realized how often he had taken his team for granted, assuming that everything would go according to plan. Now, he was reminded that adaptability, patience, and humility were just as important as skill and preparation. As the conversation progressed, the waitress moved seamlessly between the two sides, translating complex points and ensuring that the intent behind every statement was clear. She captured the nuances, the tone, and the urgency of his words. The billionaire noticed how effortlessly she managed the flow, her presence a quiet anchor amidst what had been chaos. He felt a wave of gratitude he could barely articulate. Without her, he knew the meeting could have collapsed entirely. The other party, unaware of the waitress's background, responded positively. They began to ask more detailed questions about the projections and timelines. Each question was translated precisely, and he could answer accurately, confident that they now understood him. The deal, which had seemed so fragile just moments before, started to take shape in a way that gave him hope. He could see the excitement in the eyes of the other party, their willingness to engage, and their genuine interest in moving forward. As he explained the financial details, she ensured that no word was lost, no subtle point ignored. The billionaire felt a sense of partnership forming, not just with her, but with the other side as well. Communication, he realized, was more than words. It was trust, clarity, and connection. With her help, he could finally create that connection, turning a near disaster into an opportunity to shine. Throughout the meeting, he remained focused on the essentials, guided by her translations. Every point he wanted to make, every clarification needed, every concern raised was handled smoothly. The anxiety that had gripped him earlier was replaced with a sense of flow and control. He could see the deal progressing, piece by piece, as the waitress facilitated the conversation like a skilled conductor guiding an orchestra. He began to think about the unusual circumstances that had brought them here. He reflected on how chance encounters could change the course of events. A simple decision to step in and offer help had shifted the trajectory of the entire meeting. It was a reminder of the power of human initiative, courage, and skill, even in situations where it might seem out of place. The waitress, in her quiet and unobtrusive way, had become an essential part of something much bigger than herself. As the discussion deepened, he could see the other side responding with greater confidence. Their body language was open, their gestures relaxed, and their smiles tentative but genuine. The billionaire realized that the meeting had moved from a tense negotiation to a collaborative dialogue. They were now working together to refine terms, identify mutual benefits, and explore possibilities that had seemed impossible at the start. The dynamic had shifted completely, and he owed it all to the unexpected assistance at his side. He noticed small gestures from the waitress that made a significant difference, clarifying a point with emphasis, summarizing complex ideas, and gently redirecting the conversation when confusion arose. Each time, the meeting regained momentum. The billionaire felt a profound sense of relief and admiration. He had been on the verge of panic, but now he felt capable and in control. The meeting, once a potential disaster, had transformed into a constructive and productive session. The hours passed quickly. What had begun as a stressful and overwhelming experience now became a demonstration of resilience, adaptability, and teamwork. He watched as the other party signed notes of agreement, their expressions showing satisfaction and understanding. He realized that the collaboration he had feared might never happen had arrived, not through preparation alone, but through quick thinking, skill, and the willingness of one person to step in when needed. The billionaire felt a wave of gratitude he could not fully express. He had been reminded that success often depended not only on planning and experience but also on human connection and the generosity of those willing to act. The waitress had done more than translate words. She had translated meaning, intent, and trust. She had bridged the gap that had threatened to destroy everything, and in doing so, she had played a pivotal role in securing the outcome. He began to relax slightly, his tension easing as the meeting continued. Confidence returned, tempered by humility. He realized that leadership and success were not just about knowledge or authority but about recognizing and valuing the contributions of others. In that room, in that moment, he had learned an invaluable lesson. Even the most powerful person could benefit from the initiative, courage, and competence of someone they might least expect. As the final points were discussed, the atmosphere in the room was markedly different from when the billionaire had arrived. The panic, confusion, and tension had been replaced by clarity, understanding, and collaboration. The deal was no longer a distant hope but a tangible reality, taking shape through conversation and mutual comprehension. The billionaire felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond financial gain. It was a triumph of human connection, problem-solving, and adaptability. By the end of the meeting, he was exhausted but exhilarated. The waitress had been instrumental in every step, and he could not overstate her contribution. He reflected on how unpredictable life could be, how critical moments often required thinking beyond formal roles, and how small acts of initiative could have enormous impact. Without her, the meeting might have been a failure, a lesson lost in frustration. With her, it became a success, a story of resilience and unexpected help. The billionaire shook hands with the other party, expressing satisfaction and agreement. He then turned to the waitress, offering a sincere nod and a quiet word of thanks. She smiled modestly, acknowledging the gratitude without seeking attention. In that simple exchange, he felt a deep sense of human connection. The stakes had been high, the tension immense, but they had navigated it together. It was a moment that would stay with him, a reminder of the power of kindness, competence, and courage when it mattered most. As the room emptied and the participants left, the billionaire stayed behind for a moment, reflecting on the experience. He had faced panic, uncertainty, and the threat of failure, yet through the calm and capable presence of someone unexpected, he had achieved success. It was more than just a business victory. It was a reminder that human beings could rise to challenges in ways that transcend expectation. In a world driven by money and power, the quiet, skilled, and observant actions of one person had changed everything, leaving a lasting impression on him about trust, humility, and the true nature of collaboration. The billionaire felt a renewed sense of focus as the meeting continued. The initial panic had faded, replaced by a calm determination. With the waitress translating every word carefully, the discussion flowed naturally. He could finally articulate his vision, answer questions, and respond to concerns with confidence. The other party began to engage more openly, nodding, asking detailed questions, and making suggestions. It was as if a bridge had formed, connecting two sides that had once struggled to communicate. Charts and graphs, once confusing and misunderstood, now made sense. Every point was explained with clarity, and he could see that the other party was beginning to trust his intentions. The tension that had been in the room just hours ago was replaced by collaboration. He could sense the relief in their body language, the way they leaned forward with interest rather than sitting back with suspicion. The billionaire realized that communication was not only about words but about understanding, trust, and the ability to convey meaning accurately. He paused to consider the role the waitress had played in this transformation. She moved gracefully between the two sides, translating complex concepts with precision, capturing nuances, and ensuring that no detail was lost. Her calm presence had changed the dynamic completely. The billionaire could feel his own confidence returning, supported by someone who had stepped in at the perfect moment. He was reminded that leadership sometimes meant recognizing and valuing the contributions of others, even when they came from unexpected places. The conversation deepened, focusing on specific terms, timelines, and potential outcomes. Each question from the other party was translated quickly and accurately, and his responses were conveyed with the same clarity. He noticed how small adjustments, subtle explanations, and thoughtful answers were changing perceptions. What had seemed like a fragile negotiation was now becoming constructive. The deal, which had been on the edge of collapse, was gradually taking shape. The billionaire felt a sense of exhilaration as he realized that the deal was not only possible but likely to succeed. The other party responded positively to proposals, offered constructive suggestions, and seemed genuinely interested in finding a mutually beneficial outcome. He could see the excitement building in their eyes, a reflection of shared understanding and progress. Every successful translation brought them closer to an agreement, and he was deeply aware that this would not have been possible without the waitress. He continued to present financial projections, highlighting key points and addressing concerns. Each explanation was met with careful attention, thanks to her translations. The other side began to ask questions about implementation, logistics, and potential risks. He answered them thoughtfully, and she ensured that nothing was lost in translation. The clarity she provided allowed for a more dynamic exchange, enabling both sides to explore options and solutions collaboratively. The billionaire noticed subtle shifts in the atmosphere. Smiles replaced frowns, nods replaced puzzled looks, and gestures of curiosity replaced hesitation. It was a dramatic transformation, and he felt a deep sense of relief. The meeting had started with panic and uncertainty, but now it had become productive and promising. He could see that the terms of the deal were being understood, appreciated, and considered seriously. It was a turning point, and he was grateful for the unexpected assistance that had made it possible. As the discussion continued, he realized the importance of patience and adaptability. He had initially been frustrated, overwhelmed by the lack of a translator, and anxious about the outcome. Now, with careful communication and collaboration, he could navigate the complexities of the negotiation. The waitress's skill and composure had created an environment where ideas could be shared openly, concerns could be addressed respectfully, and solutions could be found efficiently. It was a powerful reminder that success often depended on teamwork and the contributions of others. The billionaire began to feel a growing sense of accomplishment. Each resolved question, each clarified point, and each understanding reached represented progress. The other party was responding positively, showing interest and engagement, and the momentum was building toward agreement. He could feel the excitement in the room, a shared energy that propelled the conversation forward. What had once seemed like a near failure was now shaping into a successful outcome. He reflected on the lessons of the day. Preparation, skill, and experience were essential, but adaptability and humility were equally important. The ability to recognize opportunity, accept help, and leverage unexpected support had changed the course of events. He thought about how easily panic and frustration could have derailed everything, and he felt grateful that someone had stepped forward to help at the right moment. It was a reminder that human initiative and empathy could make a significant difference. The other party began discussing the finer details of the deal, exploring terms and conditions, timelines, and responsibilities. Each point was carefully translated, ensuring accuracy and understanding. The billionaire responded with clarity and confidence, addressing concerns and highlighting benefits. The process became collaborative, with both sides working together to refine and improve the agreement. The tension that had dominated the meeting was gone, replaced by constructive dialogue and mutual respect. The billionaire observed the positive changes and felt a renewed sense of purpose. He could see that the deal, once in jeopardy, was now well within reach. Every successful translation, every clarified point, every moment of understanding brought them closer to completion. He was amazed at how quickly the situation had shifted, and he realized the profound impact of effective communication. The waitress had become an indispensable part of the process, her skill and composure transforming a potential disaster into a productive, promising negotiation. As the discussion continued, the billionaire felt a deep sense of relief and satisfaction. The deal was moving forward, and the other party was engaged and cooperative. The initial panic, confusion, and frustration had been replaced by clarity, collaboration, and progress. He could see the outcome taking shape, each decision and agreement contributing to a larger success. The meeting, which had begun with uncertainty, was now on a clear path toward a positive resolution. He thought about the unusual circumstances that had led to this moment. A simple delay in translation had created a high-pressure situation, yet it had also opened the door for an unexpected hero to make a difference. The waitress had stepped in without hesitation, using her skills and presence to facilitate understanding and build trust. Her contribution had been essential, and he felt a deep sense of gratitude and admiration. It was a reminder that success often depended on recognizing and valuing the contributions of others, regardless of their position or role. The billionaire continued to engage with the other party, answering questions, clarifying points, and exploring possibilities. Each exchange was translated accurately, ensuring that the conversation remained productive and focused. The deal was progressing steadily, and he could see that the terms were being understood and accepted. The initial tension had been replaced by a collaborative spirit, a shared commitment to achieving a successful outcome. It was a powerful transformation, and he felt both relief and pride. As the meeting approached its conclusion, the billionaire felt a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction. The deal, once at risk, was now solidly on track. The other party was pleased, the terms were clear, and the collaboration had been effective. He could see the positive results of careful communication, patience, and adaptability. The waitress's role had been crucial, and he was deeply grateful for her skill and initiative. Without her, the outcome might have been very different. Finally, the final points were discussed, and agreements were confirmed. The billionaire felt a profound sense of relief and joy. The meeting had started with panic and uncertainty, but had ended in clarity, collaboration, and success. The deal, once in jeopardy, was now a reality, thanks to the combined efforts of everyone involved, particularly the unexpected hero who had stepped in at the perfect moment. The experience reinforced the importance of human connection, adaptability, and recognizing the contributions of others in achieving meaningful results. The meeting was finally coming to an end, and the billionaire felt a sense of relief he had not known for hours. The deal, which had seemed almost impossible earlier in the day, was now complete. Every question had been answered, every concern addressed, and every detail clarified. The other party smiled, shook hands firmly, and expressed their satisfaction with the outcome. The billionaire could finally breathe, knowing that the millions of dollars at stake were secure. He glanced at the waitress who had helped him, a wave of gratitude washing over him. He approached her quietly, wanting to express his thanks properly. Words felt inadequate for the role she had played, but he tried anyway. He told her how critical her help had been, how she had translated not just words, but meaning, tone, and trust. She smiled modestly, brushing off praise with humility, but he could see the pride and calm satisfaction in her eyes. She had made a difference that no one else could have, and he wanted her to know it. The staff of the hotel began to gather around, sensing that something unusual had occurred. They noticed the relief on the billionaire's face and the way he kept glancing toward the waitress. Quiet whispers spread through the room about how someone unexpected had helped save an important deal. The billionaire realized that her actions had not only influenced him and the other party but had also left an impression on everyone present. It was a reminder of how a single act of skill and initiative could ripple outward, affecting many lives. That he took a moment to reflect on the events of the day. He had arrived confident, well-prepared, and ready to negotiate, but without his translator, panic had begun to take hold. The stakes had felt overwhelming, and he had struggled to communicate even the simplest points. In that moment of crisis, the waitress had stepped in, quietly, calmly, and effectively. She had bridged a gap that could have cost him the entire deal. He understood, deeply, that her presence had changed everything. The other party began to leave, offering final smiles and nods of approval. The billionaire shook hands with them, expressing his satisfaction and appreciation. The sense of accomplishment was immense, but he knew it would not have been possible without the waitress. He made a decision to acknowledge her formally, ensuring that everyone knew her contribution. It was not just a gesture of gratitude but a recognition of the importance of her role in the outcome. He turned to her again, this time speaking more earnestly. He asked for her name and made a note to ensure that her efforts were recognized by the hotel management. She had demonstrated professionalism, quick thinking, and skill beyond what was expected of her role. The billionaire understood that success in business, no matter how much preparation went into it, often depended on the contributions of others, particularly those who stepped in at the right moment with the right abilities. As he reflected on the experience, he realized that the day had taught him more than any training or preparation could. He had been reminded of the value of patience, humility, and openness to help from unexpected sources. The panic he had felt earlier had been replaced by gratitude and respect for human capability. The lesson was clear. No matter how powerful or experienced one might be, the actions of others could profoundly influence outcomes, and recognizing those actions was essential. He walked with the waitress through the lobby, talking quietly about the meeting and its success. Staff members looked on with admiration, seeing the billionaire engage genuinely with someone who had helped him. The dynamic was unusual but heartening, showing that respect and recognition were not bound by position or hierarchy. The billionaire's appreciation was evident, and it sent a strong message about the importance of valuing contributions, regardless of how unexpected they might be. As they approached the exit, the billionaire took a moment to consider the broader implications of the day. A simple act of courage, skill, and willingness to help had changed the trajectory of a major business deal. It was a story he would remember, one that emphasized the human element behind business success. It was not just about contracts, numbers, or planning. It was about trust, communication, and the initiative of individuals willing to step up when it mattered most. He thanked her once more, ensuring she knew the depth of his appreciation. She responded with a calm smile, her humility unchanged, but he could see that the acknowledgement meant something. She had been part of something extraordinary, and her role had been pivotal. The billionaire felt a profound respect for her, recognizing that her actions had demonstrated competence, courage, and a level of skill